I stared at my phone, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. The words that just came out of my stepdad's mouth felt like a punch in the stomach. "I sold your mountain cabin to settle my gambling debts," he said. Then, he laughed. Actually laughed, like it was some funny joke he expected me to laugh along with. But it wasn't a joke. I stood there frozen, hearing the words over and over again in my head. That cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was the last thing I had from my mom before she passed away. And now, he was telling me it was gone, just like that. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed hard, refusing to let them fall. "What do you mean, you sold it?" I managed to say, my voice shaking. "Oh, come on, Logan. It's just a cabin. You don't even go there anymore," he said, chuckling. "Anyway, it's done. I needed the money." I could feel the rage building up inside me. But before I could respond, he added something that made my blood run cold. "Besides, you wouldn't have been able to keep it up forever. I did you a favor, kid." He hung up before I could say another word. I stood there, staring at the black screen of my phone, the anger and sadness boiling together until I thought I might explode. But I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room like I wanted to. Instead, I took a deep breath, wiped the tear that had finally escaped, and sat down on the couch. I had to figure out what just happened. I had to find out if it was even legal for him to sell it. I had to find out if there was any way I could get my cabin back. And that's when I remembered something my mom once told me about the cabin, a secret she made me promise not to forget. But before I could dig into it, my phone buzzed again, and this time, it wasn't my stepdad calling. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who could change everything. Before all this mess started, life was actually okay. I had a simple but peaceful life in a small town outside of Denver. I worked as a mechanic, fixing up cars for neighbors and friends. I wasn't rich, but I made enough to live comfortably. On weekends, I sometimes drove up to the mountains to visit my mom's old cabin, the one she had left to me in her will. It was a small, cozy place surrounded by tall pines, with a view of the valley that could steal your breath away. Mom and I had spent many summers there, fishing, hiking, and sitting by the fire. After she passed, the cabin became even more special. It was the one place I still felt close to her. I didn't go up as much after work got busy, but knowing it was there gave me comfort. I thought about selling it once, when money got tight, but every time I sat down with the papers, I remembered Mom's voice telling me, "Promise me, Logan. Keep the cabin. No matter what happens." So I kept it, like a stubborn kid hanging onto his favorite toy. When my mom remarried, I wasn't thrilled about it. Rick, my stepdad, was loud, rude, and always seemed to have some get-rich-quick scheme he was chasing. But Mom loved him, so I tried to get along with him. After she passed away, I kept my distance. Rick was never truly family to me. We barely spoke after the funeral, and honestly, I preferred it that way. That's why today's phone call hit me like a lightning bolt. I racked my brain, thinking back to how the ownership of the cabin worked. I was sure it was in my name. Mom had made sure of that. She wanted me to have something that was truly mine, something no one could take away. But if that was true, how could Rick have sold it? That's when I remembered the envelope. The one Mom gave me a month before she died. She told me to open it only if I ever needed proof that the cabin was mine. I had tucked it away in a safe in my closet, never thinking I'd need it. I ran to the closet and pulled out the safe, fumbling with the lock until it finally clicked open. Inside, under some old photo albums and letters, was the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a deed. And on that deed, clear as day, was my name, and only my name. My heart raced as I realized something. Rick had no legal right to sell the cabin. None at all. But before I could celebrate, my phone buzzed again. Another call. It was the number of the man Rick claimed he sold the cabin to. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. Should I answer? What if he already moved in? What if he refused to give it back? What if it was already too late? Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. "Hello," I said. There was a long pause, then a gruff voice spoke. "Logan, we need to talk about the cabin." My heart dropped. And that's when everything got even worse. "We need to talk about the cabin," the man on the phone repeated. My mind raced. Was he calling to gloat? Was he calling to warn me to stay away? I gripped the phone tighter, trying to steady my voice. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice sounding much braver than I felt. There was a grunt, and then he said, "Name's Darren. I bought the cabin. Your stepdad sold it to me 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks. I felt dizzy. 2 weeks, and I hadn't even known? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to stay calm. "I don't think you understand," I said slowly. "That cabin wasn't his to sell. It was mine. It's still mine." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Darren breathing heavily, like he was debating whether to hang up or not. Finally, he said, "Yeah, I kind of figured something was off." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding again. "I paid him cash," Darren said, "but the title he gave me, it looked weird. I hired a lawyer to check it out. And guess what? It ain't clean. If what you're saying is true, kid, you still own that cabin." Relief and confusion crashed over me at once. If I still owned it, why was Darren calling me? Before I could ask, Darren continued. "Problem is, I already put money into it. I started fixing it up. I moved some stuff in. And I ain't walking away without something to show for it." My stomach dropped. So it wasn't over. Not even close. I thanked him for calling and promised to meet him at the cabin the next day. We needed to figure this out face to face. After hanging up, I slumped onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. This was a mess. A giant, stinking mess. But at least now I had a shot at getting my cabin back. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed the deed, and started the long drive up to the mountains. The road twisted and turned through thick forests, the early morning mist wrapping the trees like ghostly fingers. As I pulled up the long gravel driveway to the cabin, my heart twisted. It looked different. There were new shutters on the windows, a fresh coat of paint on the porch. It wasn't my cozy old cabin anymore. It was changing, being molded into something else. Standing on the porch was a large man with a thick beard and weathered skin. "Darren." He crossed his arms as I got out of my truck. "You Logan," he called out. "Yeah," I said, walking toward him. We stood facing each other, two strangers with one very big problem between us. "I don't want trouble," Darren said gruffly. "But I ain't letting you just take it without making this right." "I get it," I said, holding up the deed. "But legally, it's mine. You were scammed. And believe me, I'm furious about it too." We talked for hours, going over everything. Darren showed me the fake documents Rick had given him. It was bad. Rick had forged signatures, faked notary stamps, the whole deal. "I already paid Rick 50 grand for this place," Darren said bitterly. "I'm out everything." I felt bad for him. Really, I did. He was just another victim of Rick's lies. But I couldn't just walk away from my mom's cabin. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the trees, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Darren said, "Maybe we can figure something out." Hope flickered inside me. Maybe there was a way to fix this without lawyers and fights. Maybe we could both walk away with some dignity. But just as I was about to respond, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. I turned to see a black SUV pulling up the driveway. And stepping out of the driver's seat was Rick. Smirking like the devil himself, Rick stepped out of the SUV, slamming the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. He wore sunglasses even though the sun was dipping behind the trees, and he had that same cocky grin I'd seen 1,000 times before when he thought he'd gotten away with something. "What are you two lovebirds talking about?" he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. Darren stood up slowly, his arms crossed tight over his chest. I stayed seated, trying to keep my heart from pounding out of my ribs. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," I said coldly. Rick shrugged like it was no big deal. "Just coming to check on my investment." "Your investment?" Darren growled. "You sold me a cabin you didn't even own." Rick chuckled, like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. "Relax, big guy. A deal's a deal. You paid, you got the place. Logan here doesn't even know how to take care of it. I did you both a favor." My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Rick wasn't just a liar, he was proud of it. "We're not just gonna sit back and let you steal from both of us," I said through gritted teeth. Rick took a step closer, his face darkening. "And what exactly are you gonna do about it, kid? You think some piece of paper's gonna save you?" He jabbed a finger toward my chest, and Darren immediately stepped between us, his big frame blocking Rick from getting any closer. "You need to leave," Darren said quietly, but there was a deadly edge in his voice. Rick laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Yeah, sure. You two have your little talk. But don't think this is over." He turned back to his SUV, but not before flashing me a wink that made my stomach turn. We watched as the SUV disappeared down the driveway, the sound of tires kicking up gravel long after he was gone. Darren turned to me. "That guy's a real piece of work." "Yeah," I said, feeling exhausted and sick all at once. "And he's not gonna give up easy." We sat back down on the porch. The sun had set, and the night air grew cold around us. An owl hooted somewhere deep in the woods. It should have felt peaceful, but instead, there was a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. "What now?" Darren asked. I looked at the cabin, at the home that had meant everything to my mom, to me. I couldn't let Rick win. Not this time. "I think it's time to call a lawyer," I said, my voice steady. Darren nodded. "I know a guy. He's good. Used to be a prosecutor." We made a plan. The next morning, we would drive into town, meet with Darren's lawyer, and figure out how to untangle the mess Rick had made. As I lay in bed that night, an old creaky bed that still smelled like pine and smoke from the fireplace, I thought about my mom. About how proud she was when she bought this place. About the weekends we spent fishing, hiking, sitting by the fire. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land. I was fighting for her memory. Sleep came slowly and fitfully. Every creak of the cabin made me jump. I kept seeing Rick's smug face in my dreams, hearing his mocking laugh. Morning finally came, bright and cold. I rolled out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and went outside. Darren was already up, pacing on the porch, coffee cup in hand. "You ready?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. We climbed into Darren's pickup truck and headed down the mountain road into town. The lawyer's office was in a brick building near the courthouse. Inside, it smelled like old books and wood polish. A tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes greeted us. "You must be Logan," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I'm Mr. Barnes. Let's sit down and get started." I told him everything, about my mom, the cabin, Rick, the fake sale. Darren filled in the rest. Barnes listened carefully, taking notes. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, son, you have a strong case. Very strong. But it's not going to be easy. Rick sounds like the kind of man who'll do anything to stay out of trouble." "What can we do?" I asked. Barnes smiled slightly. "We can hit him where it hurts." He laid out a plan. We'd file for a court injunction to stop Rick from interfering with the cabin. We'd press charges for fraud. And if Rick didn't cooperate, well, Barnes had some friends in law enforcement who would be very interested in hearing about a forged deed and stolen property. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. But just as we were wrapping up, Darren's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face went pale. He showed me the screen. It was a message. From Rick. "Nice little chat you're having. Hope you said your goodbyes to the cabin. Things are about to get real messy. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting into knots. What does he mean by that? Darren asked. Barnes frowned deeply. It means you boys better get back up that mountain. Fast. Without another word, we bolted out of the office, jumped into Darren's truck, and peeled out of town. I didn't know what Rick had planned, but it wasn't good. And I knew, deep down, this was about to get much worse. Darren drove like a man possessed, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel as the truck bounced and jolted up the winding mountain road. My heart hammered against my ribs, each second dragging like an hour. What do you think he did? I asked, my voice shaking. Darren didn't answer. He just pressed harder on the gas. When we finally rounded the last bend and the cabin came into view, I felt my stomach drop to my shoes. Smoke. Thin grey smoke curling lazily into the sky from behind the cabin. No, 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 I muttered, throwing open the truck door before it even fully stopped. I sprinted toward the cabin, my boots slipping on loose gravel. The cabin itself was still standing, thank God, but when I rounded the corner, I saw it. Rick had set fire to the woodshed. The small wooden structure where we kept tools, firewood, and old fishing gear was fully engulfed in flames. The fire crackled and popped, throwing sparks into the dry grass nearby. Darren was right behind me, shouting, "Get the hose. Now!" I scrambled to the side of the cabin, yanking the old green garden hose from its reel. I turned the spigot as fast as I could, but the water pressure was weak. A thin stream sputtered out. "It's not enough," I cried. Darren grabbed a shovel from the porch and started beating the flames, trying to stop them from spreading to the trees. I followed, heart pounding, the hose useless in my hands. For 20 minutes, we fought the fire with everything we had, the hose, the shovel, buckets from inside the cabin. By some miracle, we managed to keep the fire from reaching the cabin itself. Finally, the flames died down, leaving behind a smoking pile of blackened ruins. We both stood there, panting, covered in ash and soot. Darren wiped his forehead with his sleeve. That could have been a whole lot worse. I nodded numbly. My hands were shaking so bad I had to shove them into my pockets. "He really tried to burn us out," I said quietly. "Yeah," Darren said grimly, "and that's arson." We both turned at the sound of a car engine in the distance. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway, lights flashing but no siren. A stocky deputy stepped out, tipping his hat back on his head. His name tag said Deputy Cole. "Got a call about smoke up here," he said. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard. "It's my cabin. Someone set fire to our woodshed." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You know who?" I hesitated, but Darren stepped forward. "We think it was Rick Granger. He's got a history with Logan here." Cole sighed like he already knew the name. "Rick, huh? Figures." He pulled out a small notepad. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." As Darren and I gave our statements, a knot of anger started tightening in my gut. Rick hadn't just stolen from me. He hadn't just laughed in my face. He had tried to destroy the one thing left that connected me to my mom. And he thought he could get away with it. Cole finished writing and flipped his notebook shut. "I'll file a report. Fire marshal will want to take a look too. If we find evidence of arson, and I bet we will, Rick's in deep trouble." He gave me a sympathetic look. "You did good saving the cabin, son. Could have been a lot worse." After Cole left, Darren and I sat on the porch in silence, watching the smoke curl into the darkening sky. I felt hollow, angry, exhausted. How can he just keep doing this? I asked finally. "Because no one stopped him yet," Darren said. His words lit a spark inside me. I was done playing defense. I wasn't going to wait for Rick to make the next move. It was time to go on the attack. That night, while Darren slept, I sat at the old wooden kitchen table with my laptop open. I dug through old emails, property records, anything I could find. I remembered my mom once mentioning that she had recorded conversations with Rick, back when he tried to scam her into signing over the cabin. If those recordings still existed, they could blow his whole scam wide open. But where would she have kept them? As I sat there, racking my brain, I remembered something. The attic. There was a dusty old trunk up there, filled with my mom's papers. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow ladder. The attic smelled like old cedar and forgotten memories. I pushed aside boxes and Christmas decorations until I found the trunk. I flipped it open, coughing as a cloud of dust hit my face. Inside, there were stacks of papers, a photo album, and, at the very bottom, a small silver voice recorder. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Please, I thought. Please still work. I pressed play. Static crackled, then a familiar voice filled the attic. My mom. And then, Rick. Arguing. Cursing. Threatening. Clear as day. I sat there, stunned. This was it. This was the smoking gun. I clutched the recorder to my chest, a grin spreading across my face. Rick was done. He just didn't know it yet. But as I climbed down the ladder, a loud bang echoed outside, followed by the sound of shattering glass. I froze. Someone was outside the cabin. And they weren't here to talk. I froze halfway down the attic ladder, the recorder clutched tight in my sweaty hand. Another crash rang out, the sound of something heavy being thrown against the front door. Darren jolted awake from the couch downstairs. What the? It's him. I whispered harshly. Rick's here. Darren was already moving. He grabbed the fire poker from beside the fireplace and motioned for me to stay back. I ducked down behind the couch, heart thudding so loud I was sure Rick could hear it through the walls. The front door shuddered again under another blow. Come out, Logan. Rick bellowed. His voice was hoarse, almost drunken. I know you're in there, boy. You think you're smart, huh? Think you can outsmart me? Darren planted his feet in front of the door, the fire poker raised. We waited. Silence. Then, crash. A side window exploded inward, sending shards of glass flying across the floor. Rick was trying to climb through. Darren lunged forward with the poker, jabbing at Rick's legs. There was a yelp and a loud thud as Rick tumbled backward onto the porch. Without thinking, I bolted toward the front door and yanked it open. Rick lay sprawled on the ground, groaning, a bottle of whiskey clutched in one hand. He looked up at me, his face twisted in drunken rage. You think you're better than me, he slurred. You and your dead mommy's stupid little cabin? It's mine now. Mine. Behind me, Darren barked. Call the cops. Now. I stumbled back inside, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. But before I could dial, Rick scrambled to his feet and lunged forward. Darren met him halfway. The two crashed together in a mess of fists and curses, rolling across the porch. I dialed 911, yelling into the phone, we need help. Now. There's a man attacking us. 112 Clearwater Ridge, the mountain cabin. We have units nearby, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line. I watched helplessly as Darren and Rick fought. Rick landed a heavy blow to Darren's jaw, sending him sprawling. He staggered toward me, blood trickling from his lip. You're dead, Logan, Rick hissed. You and your little buddy. I backed up toward the kitchen, frantically looking for something, anything, to defend myself. My eyes landed on the old baseball bat leaning against the fridge. I snatched it up, gripping it so tight my knuckles turned white. Rick stumbled toward me, arms wide, like he was going to grab me and slam me into the wall. But just as he reached me, red and blue lights flashed through the broken window. Tires screeched on gravel. Sheriff's deputies poured out of their cruisers, guns drawn. Freeze! One of them barked. Rick whirled around, his hands in the air. For a moment, time froze. Then he dropped to his knees, muttering curses under his breath. They cuffed him roughly and hauled him to his feet. As they led him past me, he sneered, You think you've won, boy? This ain't over. You hear me? I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, breathing hard. When they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, a heavy silence settled over the cabin. Darren leaned against the doorframe, wiping blood from his mouth. You good? He asked, voice hoarse. I nodded, still clutching the baseball bat like a lifeline. Deputy Cole approached us, his face grim. You two are lucky, he said. Could have ended a lot worse. He glanced down at the recorder still clutched in my hand. And it looks like you've got something that'll make this stick. And it looks like you've got something that'll make this stick. I handed him the recorder with trembling fingers. My mom recorded him. Threats. Bribery. All of it. Cole nodded approvingly. Good work, son. Real good work. The deputies stayed for a while, taking statements, documenting the damage, snapping pictures of the broken window and the burnt-out woodshed. Finally, when the last cruiser drove off into the night, it was just Darren and me again. The cabin was a mess. Glass everywhere. Soot smudging the walls. The porch railing splintered. But it was still standing. And so were we. We sat on the porch steps, staring out into the darkness. You think he'll stay locked up? I asked quietly. Darren sighed. For tonight, at least. I wrapped my arms around my knees, feeling small against the vast, starry sky. I just wanted to keep one thing my mom loved. Darren nudged my shoulder. You did. And you fought for it. She'd be proud. I blinked back sudden tears. Thanks, Darren, I whispered. We sat there in silence, the night cooling around us. But somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Rick was like a snake. You could chop off the head, but sometimes it still bit you. And sure enough, a few days later, I got a letter. Certified mail. It wasn't from Rick. It was from his lawyer. I ripped it open, heart pounding. Inside was a thick packet of papers. Rick was suing me for ownership of the cabin. The letter said he was contesting my mother's will, claiming she had promised him the cabin before her death, claiming he was entitled to damages for emotional distress. My head swam. Darren took the papers from me and skimmed them quickly. His grasping at straws, he said. This is ridiculous. But I knew Rick. He didn't need to win. He just needed to drag me into a long, expensive fight I couldn't afford. And if he tied me up in court long enough, maybe I'd be forced to sell the cabin just to cover the legal bills. I stared out at the mountains, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I had fought so hard. And now, it looked like the real battle was just beginning. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the stack of legal papers like they were a bomb about to go off. Rick was suing me. I could already hear his mocking laugh. Darren paced behind me, muttering, "We'll fight it. We'll fight every word." But deep down, I knew court meant money. Lots of money. Money I didn't have. And that's when I remembered something. Something my mom had told me once, years ago, when I was just a kid sitting on the porch steps. When people do wrong, Logan, don't fight them alone. Good people will stand with you if you ask. Never be afraid to ask for help. I swallowed hard, grabbed my laptop, and did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote out my story. Everything, the cabin, my mom, Rick's betrayal, the fire, the attack, the lawsuit. And I posted it online, on a local community group. Within hours, it exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in. People were furious for me. Lawyers, neighbors, even strangers offered to help. One comment stuck out. I'm a real estate attorney. I'll represent you pro bono. That cabin should stay yours. Tears burned my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack open inside me. Hope. With the lawyer's help, we filed a counterclaim. We presented the voice recordings, the sheriff reports, the destruction he caused. The judge took one look at the evidence and threw Rick's case out with prejudice, meaning he could never sue again for the same thing. But that wasn't all. Rick was ordered to pay all my legal fees. And because of the damages he caused, the fire, the break-in, he was sentenced to 6 months in county jail. When the gavel banged down, sealing the ruling, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was over. Really over. I walked out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, breathing in the mountain air like it was the first real breath I'd taken in months. The cabin was safe. My mom's memory was safe. And somehow, I'd found more than just justice. I'd found a community. I'd found strength. I'd found family, not always by blood, but by heart. Darren clapped me on the back as we walked toward his old truck. "Proud of you, kid," he said with a grin. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was still long, the cabin needed repairs, windows replaced, smoke damage cleaned. But it was mine. And every nail I hammered, every board I replaced, every stone I set, it would be built on love, not fear. We climbed into the truck and drove back up the winding road toward home. Toward the cabin. Toward a future my mom would have been proud of. And as the sun dipped behind the mountains, setting the sky on fire, I knew one thing for sure. No matter what storms came next, I was ready. Because home wasn't just a place. It was a fight worth winning. And I had WON.do subscribed to enjoy more revenge videos.